Good evening and welcome to 2020. Tonight, a very special 2020. A magic carpet journey into a mysterious and to many a suspicious country filled with sounds and images you've never experienced before. The exotic world of Saudi Arabia. I recently spent 10 days in that country, which is so vital to America and to the Middle East, especially in these days of violence and upheaval. Saudi Arabia is also the birthplace of most of the September 11th hijackers. Why is that? Well, we hope to shed some light on that mystery as well.
You know, Barbara, this is an hour that the whole family should watch together, parents and kids. Because particularly now, understanding the mindset in the Muslim world is so important, and you'll see it's so fascinating. You'll meet university students who are chilling as they reveal their prejudice, and Saudi women covered from head to toe who really don't want to be like American women. And for the very first time, you will hear from Osama Bin Laden's own brother. Barbara, what surprised you over there the most?
Oh, John, let's see, almost everything. From glitzy malls that are selling scanty underwear in Saudi Arabia, to words of deeply embedded bigotry, to openness and friendship. Nothing was censored. It was just an amazing experience. So join us now as we enter a world that few Westerners ever get to see. Saudi Arabia is a study in shadowy contrasts. It has a wide-open desert and a society that has been closed and out of bounds to foreigners. The Saudi armed forces have American jets and Chinese missiles. Nomadic tribes in the desert still depend upon camels and kerosene. We Americans depend on Saudi oil. The Saudis control 1/4 of the world's supply. The relationship between our countries is under strain, and we came to Saudi Arabia with some suspicion. After all, it was mostly Saudis who hijacked our airplanes on September 11th. And the images of Saudi Arabia with which we are most familiar are full of the unfamiliar. Bearded men in flowing robes, women cloaked and veiled.
They think that most of us, if not all women, live in a tent or in the desert, or that we ride camels.
What we found surprised us and banished some stereotypes. We were given unprecedented access throughout the kingdom without restrictions or censorship.
America, very good.
America! Everywhere we noted a friendship for America and an enormous hunger for things Western. Ultra-modern malls tempt the souls and pocketbooks of these veiled shoppers. The mall, in fact, is the center of recreation for many Saudis. There are no theaters, no nightclubs. Liquor and dancing, even dating, are banned.
It's all down, it's everything undercover.
At every level of Saudi society, we found a love-hate relationship with the United States. Everywhere we heard anger at our country's foreign policy in the Mideast. The flashpoint is Palestine.
What I know and what I'm sure is American policy towards Palestinian and Israeli is totally wrong.
Through satellite dishes, Saudis are watching their first television war. The pictures from Palestine are graphic, more bloody and brutal than American television would ever tolerate.
They see it in their own television, in their own bedrooms, in their own living room. And they see it on a daily basis.
The images resonate in the palace of the Crown Prince, where he watches 37 monitors, and in homes throughout the kingdom. Even these Bedouins hear about Palestine in their tent on their portable radio. In newspapers, too, the news is all about Arab bloodshed and Israeli violence. A vendor in the marketplace.
They change their foreign policy, we will love America.
If we change our foreign policy, you would like America.
Huh?
A Muslim cleric, the imam of a mosque.
Israel is the only and the most serious and dangerous enemy of Islam and Muslims.
The anger over Palestine is part of a political and emotional stew that may have encouraged a violent turn by the 15 Saudi young men who became hijackers last September. Some Islamic extremists feel the Saudi royal family has become too liberal, unworthy of its role as the guardians of Islam's holiest shrines in the cities of Mecca and Medina. There are other flashpoints: a flagging economy, an educational system mired in dogma, and a severe shortage of jobs for an exploding younger population. It is a recipe for rage and for hate.
Rage and hate, two very destructive emotions that seem to mark these times. But when do those feelings first take hold? What can happen to the tolerance of a child? Barbara has found some troubling clues.
Why were 15 of the 19 hijackers Saudi citizens? Is there a deep systemic reason for their murderous deeds? A reason that stemmed not from Bin Laden's diabolical mind, but from the nation that reared him? Are Saudi children brought up in ways that make them vulnerable to Bin Laden's sinister preaching?
I don't think so, because the educational system in Saudi Arabia is a very open system.
Dr. Abdul Aziz Al-Tarajuri is the director of an organization that studies Islamic education.
Those 15 wrongdoers who participated in the ferocious attack do not represent the Saudi society and are not a product of the education system of Saudi Arabia. They were manipulated by a certain group for certain purposes.
Americans have the impression that instead of learning reading, writing, and arithmetic, that young Saudi people are taught primarily Islam, Islam, Islam.
No, not true. We learn mathematics, physics, all the scientific disciplines. We learn history, geography, philosophy, not only religious studies.
I have copies of some of the textbooks put out by the Ministry of Education. Here is one in which it says that the Jewish people are essentially blamed for the French Revolution, the First World War, and communism. It goes on, if you look into any crisis, Jewish people have a role to play from a high school textbook.
They are talking about the Zionist movement, you know?
I understand that, sir, but nevertheless, whatever the background reason, it is teaching hatred of Jews.
No, not necessarily.
Or hatred of Zionists who are
Not necessarily.
Jews.
Not Jews, maybe the Zionists.
Well, I want to go to another textbook, for example. This is from a high school class. One of the lessons is about a talking tree behind which a Jew hides. And the tree calls out, "Muslim, come forward. There is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him."
This is in the textbook?
Yes, sir. Why even say at the end of the day, Muslims and Jews will fight?
They are fighting now in the West Bank.
I understand that, and that is a terrible thing, but that's not something to be taught in a textbook.
It is in some historical books, not in a textbook.
You're saying these are books from hundreds of years ago.
Yeah,
but we found this today. We found this now being taught. There is another high school textbook in which it says, Muslims should be wary and be careful of Jews and Christians. Is that idea taught in your schools, to be wary of Jews?
No, the Quran doesn't say that. The Quran says that we have to be good to them.
We asked one of the most powerful men in the kingdom, Foreign Minister Prince Saud al-Faisal, about another excerpt from a high school textbook. It says, Muslims will fight the Jews just before the day of judgment and will destroy them. It is compulsory for the Muslims to be loyal to each other and to consider the infidels their enemy. Should this kind of prejudice be taught?
The textbooks that we have reviewed do not include these, but if they do, I can assure you they are going to be reformed. The problem is in the instability in the Middle East. That is what breeds frustration.
They go to the mosque on Friday, they listen to the sermon. Maybe the preacher is a person who is closed-minded and he preaches wrong interpretations of the religious text, and the people listen to them.
Whether they are getting it from their mosques or schools, some Saudis are getting a dangerous message.
You've heard the lessons of hate and suspicion that have been part of the curriculum in some Saudi schools. And if you wonder what impression such ideas can make on a child's young, trusting mind, you're about to find out in no uncertain terms. Prepare yourself as Barbara continues You'll hear disturbing words from intelligent college students who have apparently learned their lessons well.
What kind of minds does the Saudi school system produce? To find out, we traveled to the south of Saudi Arabia to the province of Asir. This mountainous region is considered a breeding ground of radical Islam. 4 of the Saudi hijackers are from here, went to school here. One even attended the local university. We asked Dr. Muhammad al-Adadi, an aide to the governor of Asir, what is and what is not being taught. We understand that King Khalid University here is a hotbed of extremism. Are the clerics who preach there more conservative, more fundamentalists?
Well, generally speaking, yes.
3 students sat down with me to help me understand their view of the world. How do you do? I'm Barbara Walters. 22-year-old Ahmed, an English major. 23-year-old Mohammed, a medical student. And 23-year-old Bassem, also an English major. You'd rather not shake hands. Who refused to shake my hand. Bassem, may I ask you why you did not shake hands with me?
Because this prohibited in Islam.
To shake hands with a woman?
Yes.
But Mohammed and Ahmed, you shook my hand.
Well, for me, if anyone respects my beliefs and understands it, I'll respect his beliefs and his customs. That's why I shake you. I respect you.
What Ahmed and Muhammad did is against Islam, to be honest with you.
Yes, but why did I do that? Because you are a stranger and you did not know some issues in my religion.
Because it's my culture. You were being polite.
Yeah.
Your religion teaches religious tolerance. Is that correct?
Yes.
Does it teach tolerance of Jews and Christians?
Yes. We accept people and we believe every human being is free to choose his religion.
Mm-hmm.
This is a rule in our religion.
You all feel that?
Yeah.
I have a copy of a textbook. It says if you look into any crisis, Jewish people have a role to play. Have you been taught this? That Jews are behind crises? You have been taught this?
Not all the evil things, but this was taken from their history.
Do you feel that?
Yes, I feel that.
You feel that Jews are responsible for many of the crises, the bad things in the world?
If someone killed a prophet or a messenger from God, I think he will do bad, worse
thing. You think the Jews killed Christ? Is that what you're saying?
Killed many prophets and messengers.
So you think the Jews in general are a bad or dishonorable people?
Yes.
Not all of them. Yeah. Not all of them.
Do you in general feel that the Jewish people in history are people who are essentially bad people and cause problems? Do you feel that, Mohammed?
Yes, I feel.
Do you feel it about Christians or just Jews?
No, just Jews.
Just Jews.
Not Christians.
Do these views influence the way they look at the U.S.? The short answer is yes. And it all goes back to the issue that was inescapable wherever we ventured in this nation, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
What I know and what I'm sure is one thing, that's American policy towards Palestinian and Israeli is totally wrong and totally shameful.
The people of America do not have a clear picture about what happened in Palestine.
The picture the Saudi students are getting comes from the West Bank and Gaza. On September 11th, however, the carnage was American. September 11th, what was your reaction when you heard or saw what happened?
I thought it was some kind of movie stuff. They are doing some movies. But I realized it's real, and it was really terrifying and shock. It was like a shock for me.
I understand that there were Saudis, especially young people, who were happy when they heard what happened on September 11th.
It's not just young Saudi. It's all around the Islamic world. Let me see many people were happy for what happened. They think that American did shameful things, especially, as I told you, in Palestine.
Do you think it was Saudi hijackers who hit the buildings?
There were many Saudis accused to be the executors of attacks, but we don't have any evidence. But there is other evidence that about 4,000 Jewish people were not in the International Trade Center.
So you think that 4,000 Jewish people deliberately stayed home because they knew the attack?
Maybe, maybe some of them, someone warned them. Okay, I'm not sure. I have no evidence, so I'm not using this as a proof.
Why do you think they feel that way?
Well, it's not only those students you have interviewed. This is one of the many theories of conspiracy that have circulated in the whole Arab world, even among the highly intellectual people. We tend to be, culturally speaking, to blame the other, for our own faults. And this is what has happened after September 11th.
We don't believe in extremism. I think it's even against our religion.
Prince Khalid al-Faisal, the governor of Asir, is Dr. al-Odadi's boss. He concedes that this kind of viewpoint could be dangerous, and that to fix the problem, the Saudi royal family must walk a tightrope between reform on the one hand and religious fundamentalism on the other. You are known as a voice of moderation in your country, and Crown Prince Abdullah, your country's leader, has called for self-reflection for Saudis. What changes do you think are necessary?
It's not the change, it's a development of thinking, the system of education, the social system, the economical system. All these things need development.
Especially the economic system. Saudi Arabia right now is going through a serious financial slump. Almost 3/4 of the population is under the age of 29. There are few jobs waiting for students like these, and even fewer they are willing to take. With so many social restrictions, young men have few outlets for their frustration. Many are bored, spending their weekend nights loitering at malls, aimlessly driving up and down the busy streets, chatting with girls the only ways possible, on their cell phones or on the internet. Others are simply angry. Osama Bin Laden took advantage of this. What do you think of Osama Bin Laden?
If we suppose that Osama Bin Laden is terrorist, let us begin with your president, George Bush. What happened in Afghanistan? About 5,000, I'm not sure about the number, 5,000 innocent Afghans were killed. They were innocent. So I'm not saying that Osama Bin Laden not terrorist, but I'm saying that there are many terrorists around the world. To be just is to judge all the terrorists, not just judge one.
This is an opportunity for you to talk to Americans, perhaps American young people like yourself.
I want to tell them that we did not hate them, but please don't support enemies against Muslims.
Each country and each nation has its own beliefs. So we respect their beliefs and we believe in them as a human.
You always seem to have the last word, Beth.
I deal with American people or any other people individually. I'm saying this, open your mind and I'll open my mind. If you respect me, for sure I respect you. If you like me, for sure I like you. And if you hate me, I'll hate you.
Articulate and very disturbing at the same time. Something jumped out at me. That verse that was quoted about the tree hiding the Jew and calling the Muslim for it to kill, that very same verse, Osama bin Laden quoted to me in the first interview I did with him.
And so you think, where do they get it from, you know? The Saudi royal family, the government says they want to modernize, they want to change these textbooks, but so many of the clerics want to not just stay in the past, but go to the past. It is a very fine line they may not be able to cross. Only months ago, the thought of a Saudi woman speaking to a Western reporter like myself would have been unthinkable. Now many Saudis, from the royal family to ordinary women, feel since September 11th, the time has come to better explain themselves. In this rare interview, the women talk with disarming honesty about the problems and the pleasures of being a Saudi female. Morning prayer in the home of Maha El-Monif, a Saudi doctor. The life of a Saudi woman is cloaked in secrecy. Rarely has a camera been allowed to penetrate the private life of Saudi women. who for Americans are a symbol of Saudi repression. I spent 10 days in Saudi Arabia to better understand the differences between our cultures. Often I covered my head, always my arms and legs. Not to would have been a sign of disrespect. I traveled to the desert, to the tents of Bedouin men, traditionally forbidden to women, to the sprawling urban malls that sell sexy clothes to the women who can only reveal them at home, and to this remote bazaar where older women told me they want the right to drive. One U.S. official said that next to the Taliban's cruel treatment of women in Afghanistan, Saudi restrictions are the most oppressive on earth. The truth, like everything here, is more complicated. So with reluctance and trepidation, 4 middle-class working women, a pediatrician with 3 children, a writer engaged to be married, a widowed professor, and a teacher raising 5 sons, sat down to talk with me. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions that American women have about Saudi women?
One of the images is of the Saudi princess who lives a very high life of luxury, who is not doing anything, who sleeps until 2 o'clock, wakes up and have, her parties at night.
Sounds good to me.
And there is also the other image of a Saudi woman who is downtrodden, completely subdued by her husband and by the society. Both of those images are not representative of Saudi women of today.
But there are no misconceptions when it comes to certain restrictions against women. Women cannot drive. They can't be admitted to a hospital without permission from a male relative. The same applies to travel. They are segregated in schools, streets, restaurants, and public transportation. Of these restrictions, which are the most difficult for you?
Not driving is very, very difficult for me, and it's frustrating at times.
There are 500,000 immigrant drivers in Saudi Arabia, there just to transport women around the country. But that's only for families that can afford to pay for drivers. If a family cannot afford a driver, the father or husband must leave work to take his wife or children everywhere they need to go. For the kingdom, this is a tremendous economic drain. Nothing in the Quran dictates that women can't drive. The Saudi ban is based on a strict ruling by the country's highest religious clerics. It is only in Saudi Arabia of the Arab countries that women are not permitted to drive. All of you would like to drive in this country if you were allowed to. Yes?
Yes.
I would not.
You would not. Now you're the youngest and you would not want to drive.
Just thinking of the harassment that I might face if I drive a car would definitely hinder me.
Some women actually do drive, that is in secret. Dr. Al-Monif took us to the desert, and there she drove freely through the sand. A sharp contrast to life back in the city, where a trip to work or the grocery store means literally taking a back seat.
We want to drive.
12 years ago, during the Gulf War, 50 Saudi women drove in protest. Some were arrested or lost their jobs. Nearly all were branded as outcasts. What if thousands of women got together and protested? Is that even something that is thinkable?
It's not within our tradition.
We wouldn't ask for it by force. We would use convincing.
Do you want your wife and daughters to drive?
I have no compunction against that.
Prince Saud al-Faisal is Saudi Arabia's foreign minister. How would you explain to Americans these restrictions on your women?
God knows the women folk in my home, my daughters and my wife, are more harsh than your question indicates in their talk. Every night I hear this.
What do you say to them?
I agree with them, of course.
To Americans, perhaps, the greatest symbol of oppression is the forced wearing of the veil and robe known as the abaya. To these women, however, oppression is hardly the word they would use. When you dress in black and sometimes cover your faces, does this bother you, or is it okay?
Sometimes I consider my robe as a bless.
Why is it a plus?
I wouldn't have to overdress. I'll just put it
like
on.
Like a uniform.
Exactly, just slip it on, hit the road.
What about covering your faces? I have seen the women and I think, how do they see?
It's like sunglasses or something.
Yeah. I'll take your word for it. When I go to the mall, You're a very modern mom. I see all kinds of things being sold for women. They can't all be for foreigners. Do you buy those clothes?
Yes, we do.
Low-cut things, spangles,
Yes.
sequins,
You
beads?
should see us in parties.
Yeah, what do you look like when this comes off?
Miss Universe.
I'll bet you do. As liberated as these women may feel at home, once they step outside, they remain second-class citizens who walk a delicate line between reform and living with traditions that are strictly, even harshly, enforced. If you walk down the street and your head and your face are not covered, what happens?
You can be stopped by the mutawa or the religious
The matawa
police.
is the religious police.
The religious police saying that you have to be covered.
Islam doesn't dictate that women cover their faces. The religious police impose that restriction in the name of Allah. Run-ins with the matawa, who patrol all the streets and malls, can lead to public humiliation, tears, and even jail. In spite of all the restrictions, our women said they feel protected by their husbands or fathers and comforted by a strong extended family. Sometimes these families are really extended. How do you feel about Muslim men being allowed to have 4 wives?
We don't feel good about it.
We don't
We
like
don't
it
feel
at
good
all.
about it
When
at all.
it is necessary for him to have good, like he doesn't have children, for example, or his wife is sick, for example, then he's allowed. But if it's just for the fun of it, no, I wouldn't.
And he has to also go and seek the permission of his first wife in order to marry the second wife. And you know, it's not going to happen. She is not going to give him permission.
Do any of your husbands have more than 1 wife?
No.
Did any of your fathers?
My grandfather.
Your grandfather?
Only for the sake of having more children.
How many wives did he have?
I had 3.
In other aspects of life, there are signs of change. Crown Prince Abdullah, whom our women universally praise, has spoken out in favor of more rights for women. But still, there are pressing concerns, like education. From childhood through university, men and women are schooled separately. Only 7% of the women are in the workforce. They are mostly limited to the so-called caring professions, like medicine, and completely shut out of positions of power.
If we don't, as a society, open up the role of women, we are going to die as a society.
All of us have to work.
All of you have to work.
I have
I
to
am
work.
the breadwinner of my family, and I'm the only one who's supporting them.
Do you want what we call equality of the sexes?
I want equality in all areas. Equality to choose the husband you want, equality to choose the education you want, the equality even when you go out on the street, having the freedom out on the street. I want that equality.
But they don't want everything that Western women have.
I wouldn't want to be forced to do some sort of work to provide, for example, the living for my children. It is left to be optional for me.
Well, I don't want to work in something that will hurt my muscles or that I have to pay lots of physical, work. No, I don't want that equality, really.
Is there any message that you would like to give to American women?
Saudi women have a very significant role, and I wish they respect the culture that we have, the tradition, and above all, our religion. What is best for the Western community not necessarily is the best for our community here.
Something for us to remember.
It sure is. Well, coming up next, a frightened man, Osama Bin Laden's youngest brother. I mentioned having interviewed Osama Bin Laden, and when I did, he blamed the Saudi royal family for driving a wedge between him and his own family. And since September 11th, no member of the Bin Laden family has spoken out, frightened of harassment and of calling attention to themselves. But now, for the very first time, the Bin Laden family has sent one of its own to talk with Barbara.
He is 35 years old, and his name is Abdullah. He is Osama Bin Laden's youngest brother. And as we sat down together, he was so nervous, and who could blame him? He had a difficult task to talk about the brother who has turned their respected family name into an object of fear and loathing. Osama Bin Laden, the bearded fugitive we've seen gloating on tape, the Afghan freedom fighter, the man who has declared a holy war on the United States. It's hard to think of Osama bin Laden rollicking in Lebanon's flesh pots, chasing women and pouring liquor down his throat, but he did. He did all of that in Beirut as a college student, regularly escaping the ascetic ways of Saudi Arabia to cut loose with wine and women. He was a child of privilege, wealthy and spoiled, coming of age in the prosperous port city of Jeddah on the Red Sea. His father, although illiterate, founded the largest construction firm in the country.
The Bin Laden family is truly a Saudi success story.
Prince Bandar bin Sultan, the Saudi ambassador to the United States, admired Mohammed bin Laden.
It's one man, self-made, and that one man with his work ethics became part of the Islamic world.
Bin Laden's company expanded the holy mosques in Mecca and Medina, contracts directly offered by the royal family. Bin Laden construction also changed the face of Saudi Arabia over the past 40 years. Roads, airports, bridges, and skyscrapers.
And it's an ironic fate of history that one Bin Laden had so much positive force to contribute to architecture, to development. Another Bin Laden was hurt Islam.
Osama bin Laden was one of 54 children Mohammed sired by several wives. When Osama fully embraced Islam in his 20s, he did so with a vengeance. He eventually went to Afghanistan to lead Muslim freedom fighters against Soviet invaders. Abdullah bin Laden is one of Osama's younger brothers. He has a Harvard law degree and was living in Boston on September 11th. He has been back in Saudi Arabia since then, in fear of harassment. But Abdullah bin Laden reluctantly agreed to break the family silence and speak with me. September 11th, when you realized that the attacks were the work of your brother, how did you feel?
First of all, I mean, we were horrified by the tragedy. We were saddened by it because I've been living there and it's part of my life. And I looked at it as a tragedy not only for American, but for humanity as a whole.
How difficult has this been for your family?
We went through a tough time. It was difficult, but and we felt we are a victim as well. But no matter what happened to us, it is not. I mean, as our tragedy is not as bad, or we don't feel about as those victims, the family of the victims in New York. I mean, our tragedy comparing to their tragedy is there is no comparison, and we do feel for them.
Do you have any idea what made Osama bin Laden the man he is?
I wish I can answer this question.
Abdullah bin Laden finds the question difficult because his brother, Osama, has been estranged from the family for some time. At one point, Osama was in line to take over the construction business, but he turned his back on the family and its business after Afghanistan. By then, the targets of his Islamic fervor had grown to include the rulers of his homeland, Saudi Arabia, and the imperialists in the United States. His own family began to shun him. When was the last time you saw him?
The last time I saw him in the late 80s. This was during the funeral of my oldest brother when he died.
What was he like?
I don't recall things because it was a family tragedy.
So you barely know him.
It's true.
And yet you have the pressure of bearing a family name as distinguished as it is.
That's true. We do want to feel guilty by association, or we do want people to accuse us of being guilty by us because we carry the same name.
Your family cut off funds to Osama bin Laden. When did you do that, and under what circumstances?
The family got separated from him in 1993.
You cut off all funds?
Everything.
Everything. And no one in the family continued to see him?
No.
Does any of your family still support Osama bin Laden in any way?
No.
No. Not emotionally and not in terms of any kinds of funds? No. I understand that at one point your family tried to plead with Osama bin Laden to change his views.
To the best of my knowledge, yes, they tried, but I'm not aware of the details.
What would you most like to say to the American people? What would you most like them to understand?
We are a big family. We have so many brothers and sisters. And if a member took a different direction, the rest shouldn't be blamed for the act of one individual.
The terrible trouble one brother can cause. Abdullah bin Laden says that he hopes one day soon he can return to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he says he had been very happy.
Before September 11th, if you gave a thought to Saudi Arabia at all, it probably had to do with oil and your car. Now the association is terrorism. Is the bond, however testy, between the United States and the Saudis broken for good? Barbara looks into the future, starting with the very influential foreign minister, Prince Saud Al Faisal.
Your Royal Highness, most of the hijackers were Saudis. Some people say Saudi Arabia bears some responsibility for the attacks.
This, of course, came as a shock to us. And the hurt that we feel is compounded by this fact that Saudis were involved in it.
It may be that Osama bin Laden deliberately chose Saudis to participate, to make trouble between our two countries. Do you think so?
On purpose, definitely. He wanted to drive a wedge between the two countries.
And he succeeded. Some of the damage to U.S.-Saudi relations has been repaired since September, but differences do stand out. Iraq is one of them. Saudi bases, the foreign minister told us, would be out of bounds in any military action the United States might want to take against Saddam Hussein. The Palestinians, as you have heard, are another problem area. The Saudis feel the U.S. has unfairly favored Israel over the years. But during our visit, even where the hand of friendship was withheld, we found a genuine admiration for America and Americans. Everywhere, we met far more moderates than extremists, people concerned about the strain between our two countries, but hopeful about the future. Prince Bandar, whose experience straddles both countries, has a unique perspective.
I had the honor to be ambassador to your country, a great country, for almost 20 years now. I have never seen this relationship being tested as much as it has been since 11 September. But my gut feeling tells me this relationship is based on solid foundation that it will survive. But I will be less than honest with you to say it's not being tested severely now. And I believe Crown Prince Abdullah, President Bush, have enough wisdom between the two of them. Both are straight shooters. And at such trying times, you need leaders who start from the assumption of being friends to be straight with each other. And that, I think, is going to save the relationship and bring it back to what it was. But it's been tested severely, I must tell you.
Perhaps it is being tested. I mean, for so many years, the relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia boiled down to the U.S. providing security in return for oil. Much more complicated than that now. And the Crown Prince, the leader of the country, is not standing on the sidelines during this either.
No, big Arab summit meeting this week with a peace plan for Israel, which will probably be very hard for them to accept. But that's why it's so important that we understand the mindset of the countries in that area, and I hope that maybe we were able to shed a little light tonight.
I hope we have. That's our program for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to watch Nightline after your local news. I'm John Miller.
And I'm Barbara Walters, and for all of us here at 2020, we wish you and your family a very happy Easter. Good night.